A gauntleted knuckle tapped against the hard wood of a doorframe. The one-armed elf within the old guard barracks lifted his head from his journal, casting a curious glance to his visitor. His visage shifted from interest to a wary gaze as the woman before him glared back. Letting out a long exhale, he looked to his side at the sleeping feline in the hammock he sat on. He snapped the book shut and set it on the floor, the sudden noise making the cat's head jerk up. The elf gave his pet an apologetic look before finally breaking the silence as the tattoos that formed a tapestry on the skin of his only flesh arm started glowing a cool blue, illuminating the area around him in a soft hue. Growls? The pale elf had an underlying worry to his words. Give us a minute, yeah? Growly looked to her master with suspicion, hopping off the hammock and shifting her eyes to the visitor, standing just barely illuminated by the glow. The dwarf's stern look never left the elf. The cat sat in place, rooting herself like a stump as she faced her protector, as if demanding answers. Just need some privacy, alright? Please? Despite his regular smug pride, the man was begging and made little effort to hide it. With an unsure nod, the cat retreated from the room, moving down the hall towards the bar in search of others. The elf shrank once he was alone with his visitor, shoulders falling forward and head hanging low as the glow of his tattoos died out. The dwarf in the doorway remained still, her arms folded while watching her target's every move. They both waited, each expecting the other to make the first move, both tempted to reach for their weapons to end it quickly. After what seemed like an eternity, the elf spoke first. You here to kill me, boss? He lifted his head to face her, only half joking. With as little movement as possible, the dwarf took a letter from her belt and tossed it to him, the parchment landing in his lap. Should I be? She replied coldly. She pushed her shoulder against the wall to straighten herself up, her hands falling to her sides and hovering above the pommel of her axe and the chain of the hook that hung from her hip. Cyrak grabbed the parchment, reading through its contents with a look of confusion. As he read, dread overtook his expression, as the words stabbed blades of panic through his chest. It was an anonymous, hastily written warning that detailed Cyrak's supposed involvement in the recent assassination attempt of one of the founding members of the Old Guard, Kroll. An attack that left the giant in critical condition to this very day. The man stood up, slower than he'd ever moved in his life. He picked up the crimson coat that lay hanging off his hammock and put it on, covering his tattoos and forged prosthetic. He raised his hands carefully and kept his voice low. Talia? Commander? This ain't right. I didn't attack Kroll, Cyrak said softly, watching her every move. I can't believe it. I can't believe I almost trusted you. Talia scoffed bitterly at her own foolishness. But I'm being too hard on myself. You managed to lie past Kemsa and join us after all. If you can fool a spy master, how could you not fool a retired shield? It ain't Kemsa's fault. I just told him I was a friend of Sarah Valtillin, which is only half a lie. Listen, I've got nothing to hide. I'll even disarm myself. He reached to his belt, unclipping a sheath and letting his rapier fall to the floor. Funny. She never talked about you. The dwarf cocked her head to the side, unimpressed. Wouldn't expect her to. It was aboard her father's ship. Of course. A vile man would have an equally vile crew. The dwarf's eyes narrowed in the dim light. Allow me to defend myself. Come on. Are insults really necessary, boss? The elf took a short stride closer. Stop calling me that! She swung her fist to the side, the gauntlet cracking against the wood, chipping some of it off and leaving splinters sticking out from the impact. I am not your boss, and you are not part of the family I built! The pale elf raised his hands further, holding his ground as the armoured warrior took a challenging step into the room and closed the distance between the two. "You alright? I'm not part of your family, I suppose. But I am part of a family. One I built out here. A family I changed for. That changed me. I'm a different man now, Cadash. I know you know what that's like. Why would I throw that away and attack Kroll?" The elf gently reached his forged hand out to place it on her shoulder. "Don't act like you fucking know me!" The dwarf grabbed his hand, twisting it to the side and forcing the elf to bend his legs to reduce the strain. "You think I'll fall for that again? That I'll ignore all the lives you've ruined because you changed? Should the law care that you have a family now? You sure as fuck didn't care about Kroll's family." "Talia, I didn't. Don't. It'll damage the arm." The elf begged, moving his body as best he could to ease the stress on the intricacies of his forged limb. "Don't use my name. You don't get to use my fucking name, you murderer." With a simple flex of her strength, the dwarf threw the elf onto the ground, the impact against the stone cutting along and weakening the leather straps that held the limb to his body. The elf tried to get himself up onto his knees, the prosthetic still in the clutches of the dwarf. When he did finally rise up to face her, he was thrown right back down with a left hook to the eye, the impact almost immediately leaving a nasty bruise. "I warned you. I warned you what would happen if you slipped up, and you still fucking tried your luck. Clearly you didn't think I was serious. Well, I'm about to keep my word, you pathetic scum." The dwarf spat with cruelty in her voice. The elf lifted his head from the ground, blinking a few times as the words set in. "Commander, just stop. I've been..." He rubbed the growing bruise on his face with his hand, trying to reorient himself. "I've been working to atone. Been doing good work. And I ain't gonna stop until I've redeemed myself. But this... You gotta see that this is a setup. I wasn't even on the job Kroll got attacked on." The dwarf's face twisted with anger at his words. "Redeem yourself? You don't get to decide when you've redeemed yourself, Kirsty. You don't get to choose how you repay your debt. I do. And it's painfully clear how beyond redemption you are. For the sake of my family and the world at large, I am going to give you exactly what you deserve." She pushed him back onto the stone with a steel-covered boot, nearly crushing his chest without even trying. He pleaded, grabbing at the boot to try and pry it off of him with his free hand. "What did I say about calling me that?" With another twist and a pull, the leather gave way. The forged arm struck the floor, dropped out of the dwarf's hand as she ripped it straight out of the elf's sleeve. The prosthetic immediately went limp once away from him, dead on the cold stone as the man watched with horror. The dwarf's violent gaze remained fixated on him, and another silence fell between the two. Prey and predator stared each other down, as Talia slowly drew her axe while Cyrak pleaded with horrified eyes. "Talia!" A distant call boomed through the door, accompanied by thundering, running footfalls. The dwarf bared her teeth, ignoring the interruption as she raised her axe. Cyrak winced in anticipation for the end, all of his attempts to clear his name having fallen on deaf ears. Before the blade could swing, however, two forms slid to a stop in the doorway in a hurried panic. One was the silhouette of a large orc, eyes wide and moving urgently. The other was an equally distressed feline, desperate to protect her carer. "Talia!" The orc shouted in an attempt to halt the dwarf's execution, charging towards her. "What?" She snapped, yanked from her rage-filled bloodlust. "Gorgoth?" Her expression softened as she saw her blood brother wearing the same expression as her quarry. Gorgoth darted forwards and grabbed her axe hand in an attempt to prevent her from acting further. "It was fake! The letter was fake!" He blurted out as he locked his wide eyes with hers. "Kroll's awake! He said it was the red bandits that attacked him!" Talia's breath grew shallow as the axe slacked in her grip, sliding down until the top of her fist slid beneath its beard. She stared up into the orc's eyes. The way he was looking at her crushed her spirit in an instant. Her rage and righteous fury melted away like snow in a desert, replaced with a powerful and unrelenting guilt. "What in the world are you doing, Tal?" "We agreed we were going to investigate the letter first." The orc scolded in a concerned whisper. Breaking eye contact with Gorgoth, Talia looked down to the elf that lay under her boot. With horror at her actions plastered across her own face, she took a staggered step back and lifted her foot from Cyrak's chest. Moving her gaze from one man to the other, she found no words to defend herself. For the first time, Talia fled, bolting at the door in an urgent stride. Her thundering, metal-coated steps clunked against the stone floor. Gorgoth sent a glance down to Cyrak, making an attempt to say something as his knee-jerk reaction compelled him to defend Talia. When no words came, he turned away from the elf and hurried after the dwarf. Once alone, Cyrak pushed himself up onto his elbow, turning his attention to Growly. The cat, having sensed the tension behind the dwarf's arrival, lay down next to the elf. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, winded from frantically searching for a high-ranking member of the old guard to protect her master. Slowly laying his head back down on the cold stone, Cyrak put his arm around the cat and softly scratched the top of her head. "Good girl," he said softly.